All new. On today's episode, we take a look at the life of Limpho Hani, who is the widow of Chris Hani, and get to see the woman behind the headlines.
This country is finished. Where in this country, a foreign white can come into South Africa, kill my husband. I don't know if you had, Zondo never referred to my family, to myself, to my children, and the trauma and the suffering. He couldn't give a shit. Sorry for my French. He couldn't be bothered.
Is she an angry, bitter black woman, as most describe her? Or is she a woman that's been failed constantly by the system? Join me as we look into her whole entire life.
I don't have closure. That's why I'm wearing black today. I'm still mourning. Until such time the truth comes out, I'll be mourning for life.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B. Hey guys, and welcome to another exciting episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B. Please say the B. Please say the B. You better say the B. AKA the elusive pundit. Honey, how are you feeling? I am actually feeling good. Yeah, I did say we're going to be in a new environment in the last video that I did. So this is the new environment. I'm not sure if this is going to be the permanent setup, but this is what we have for now. But I do hope that you guys actually join me to actually learn about Umama Limpho. So Limpho Hani is actually, before we get into that, hold on. So August has Women's Day, and I was actually thinking about what should I do as a theme for the month of August. It's not Women's Month, but we do have Women's Day. And I was like to myself, you know what? We actually hear a lot of stories about the political figures like Nelson Mandela, O.R. Tambo, Steve Biko, Chris Hani, Joe Slovo, but we rarely hear anything about the wives. And the only thing I know to be true in life is that behind every successful man, there is a woman. So I was like, so what am I going to do for August with this information? I was like, well, I am going to shine the light on the women that were with these men. I'm going to call this series Unsung Heroes, the wives of anti-apartheid heroes that we rarely hear about or we never hear about. I know Mama Winnie is a big deal, but she's not the only one that was behind a huge political figure. So what is my intention behind this? I wanted to show the human aspect of these women. I don't want to show them as like political fighters or whatever, or actually just a backdrop to their husbands. I want to shine the spotlight on them. And I hope I do a great job. I've been praying to all the gods available that I actually do this series justice, because I do care about South African history. I do care about politics. Growing up, I thought I was going to be involved in politics. But you know what, you grow up and you realize, like, you know what, I baliganga that much. You can actually contribute to South Africa from other angles, like I'm doing with education. So without further ado, let's get into it. So namhlanje we're going to be talking about Umama Limpho Hani. So she is the widower of Chris Hani. Everybody knows who Chris Hani is. If you don't know, Google is your friend, my friend. Or better yet, AI is your friend, my friend. So, ngubani umama Limpho? So, Limpho Hani is a Lesotho. She was born in Lesotho in 1948. So she is actually now 77 years old. She is still alive, thriving. So Mama Limpho actually got an education. It doesn't say what degree or what certificate she actually did, but she did end up working in tourism, in the tourism department in Lesotho in starting from the early 70s, actually. And we don't hear much information about her family, but I can deduce from the fact that she was a woman in the 70s that actually did get an education and was afforded an opportunity to have a corporate career, that it wasn't a traditional rural family. So I'm going to deduct from that that she did probably have both parents. They were in marriage, and on top of that, there were some financial acumen in the family for her to be able to go to school. Because back in the day, it wasn't actually encouraged for females to go to school and have a career. You were more likely to be married off. So that's what I'm going to say about Dimple's early life. And it doesn't say anything about siblings. I did try to find information about that.
Chris was a husband to me. Yes, I knew he was a revolutionary. To me, he was a loving dad, an understanding partner, very funny. He could hardly dance. And
he could hardly dance?
No, he didn't know how to dance. My daughters and I are good dancers.
Yeah.
All you could do was just to look at us, you know, and say, wow, this is beautiful, but he couldn't. Poor guy.
Oh, man.
But otherwise, like I say, he adored his daughters.
Yeah.
And they knew the father adored them.
It doesn't say much about the beginnings of her relationship with Chris Hani, because the first connection that we do get with Chris Hani and Dimpho is the birth of their first child, Uneo, in 1973. So I was like, okay, then let me go find out what Chris Hani was actually doing, because Chris Hani was a Vaba. Abazabam Vaba, actually. So together, we are together with Chris Hani. So Chris Hani was born in Vaba, and his father was involved in the political struggle, and they had joined MK, which was like a guerrilla. What do we call MK again? But they like used to go and fight or try to fight to fight the apartheid government. So it was like soldiers, I would believe. I actually have no words to sort of like describe what MK was. And so in the MK situation, Chris Hani's father now, Chris Hani decided to join the struggle with his father. And they were actually sent to Lesotho for this MK training. So I am assuming, because I am an assumer, is that this is actually how Chris Hani and Dimpho met. It doesn't say whether they met under like trying to fight apartheid or they just met because Chris Hani and her were in the same location. So they meet obviously before 1973, and they have this child. Never was born in Lesotho in 1973. And then the next information we get about Chris Hani and Dimpho is the fact that they actually do get married in Lesotho in a magistrate court in 1974. And they go and celebrate their union at a wimpy restaurant. And after they get married, Dimpho actually goes to Yugoslavia to study further. It doesn't say what she actually went to go study in Yugoslavia. I'm assuming something that has to do with tourism. So the first thing that I want to say about Dimpho pertaining to her relationship with Chris Hani, she was always glued to Lesotho. The only information I will say about Chris Hani, because this puts together the type of woman Dimpho ultimately had to become, is the fact that he was heavily involved in the anti-apartheid struggle, and he was in this MK. He was also part of the ANC, and he was part of the SACP as well. So he was a very busy man, going to train in different countries, in different territories. So he was very much busy and very much not a centralized person. So he didn't stay in one place, because he couldn't stay in one place because of the kind of work that he was doing. And I don't know if Dimpho knew this information prior to getting into the relationship, but she had to be accustomed to that. So that's the initial stages of the relationship between Chris Hani and Dimpho. And you can see the fact that it wasn't stable in terms of having a solid foundation. And I mean by foundation, like a place where they could be like, okay, Slalapa Sobai too. And for me, this gets confirmed by the fact that they actually don't get married in Lesotho. They don't get married in South Africa, and they are from Lesotho and South Africa, and they get married in a foreign place in Lusaka, Zambia. They do move back to Lesotho in 1975. And this is the only time where it looks like they could be like a strong family foundation of them being in one location and with their child. And another information that we get about Dimple from this time and space is the fact that she did have a job. The girl always kept a job from the jump. She's always had a job at the tourism department in Lesotho. And from what I have researched and gathered, is the fact that she was the primary breadwinner in the household because she had a stable job. I don't know if Chris Hani was getting paid from his work as part of the ANC, the SACP, and the MK. And if it was, it probably was not enough. So in 1976, this is the only time where Dimpo is actually connected to any involvement in the political struggle. In 1976 in South Africa, there was the Soweto student uprising, and it was students in South Africa that were fighting against having to learn in Afrikaans, because Afrikaans was the language of the oppressor, and they were sick and tired of learning in Afrikaans, so they decided to revolt. So, because of that, the South African police force decided to hunt down the people that were involved in the 1976 uprising. And some of them decided to flee to Lesotho. And this is the first instance where she is actively involved in the anti-apartheid struggle by having to smuggle these anti-apartheid political activists that were now coming into Lesotho, running away from the South African government. In her involvement, she actually does get found out, and she does get apprehended by the South African police force, and she is sent to prison between 1977 and 1978. It doesn't say much about how long she was in prison, whether majority was in 1977 or it was in 1978. But we know between 1977 and 1978, she was actually arrested and was in prison. And I don't know how she got out. The only clip that we actually do find from reading and doing research is the fact that she sold one of the guys to the South African police. And I don't know, then she got free or was released. I'm not saying she did. All I'm saying is that that's the only piece of information that's given to us on Wikipedia. So I don't know if she got freed because she ratted someone out, or it was, I don't know. But the girl was still in Lesotho. Before we move to the second child, I wanted to say something about Udimpo as a human being. So my understanding and what I deduced from what I searched and the interviews and everything is I believe that the girl got into a relationship with Chris Hani, the human being. And you know, when you're in love, it's the early stages of the relationship. You got sold a dream. You're like, yeah, we gotta be together, love of my life. I feel like she got into the relationship to be with Chris Hani as a human being. And at the time, I was trying to do calculations, trying to figure out what age they actually met. And it was around the early 20s. So she was young, she was impressionable, and Chris Hani is a charmer. And he is, you get what I'm saying? Like, if you do research on him, you'll be like, hey, this guy, hello. So my understanding is that she was in love with Chris Hani as the man, and she wanted that relationship with Chris Hani. And we've all been in love, we've all wanted a man. And oftentimes, when you find love early and you are introduced to something that you have never witnessed before, you tend to sort of like be ignorant and naive to sort of like the extremity of it. And I think Dimpo's situation was sort of like a graduation. You are young, you are in love, you are naive, and then it starts getting bigger. Hey, guys, this guy is here today in Lesotho, but then he has to go to Lusaka in Zambia. And then you're like, okay, I can withstand. So I feel like her relationship with Chris Hani was sort of like a graduation into like sort of like the extremity that would actually be Chris Hani and the role that he had to ultimately play in the South African political landscape. And I also think for Chris Hani, because this was the first time this was being done, I wanted you to look at the timeline. So 73, she has a first child. By 76, the child is probably, wait, 74, 5, 6, 7. So the child is around like 4 years old, her first baby, Uneo. And then in between the chaos of her being arrested, her being involved in smuggling ANC politicians to Lesotho, running away from the government, she actually falls pregnant with the second child, Ukwezi. She gives birth in 1978, so she was probably pregnant early 1978 or 1977. And this time it was real chaos, and this chaos was at her front door. So all of this is happening in and around her. It's chaos. She's got the love of her life. At least the love of her life is in and around Lesotho at this time. But again, it's not stable in and around Lesotho, out of the country, inside of the country, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like it's a safe situation. He's literally on the run. And then amidst that chaos, baby number two is born in 1978. 79, 80, 81. She has the last born, Ulindiwe, in 1981. And what was happening in and around that time was that when Steve Biko was back in Lesotho, the South African government knew he was there. I don't know how they found out. There were actually 3 assassination attempts attempted in his life. Her life was in danger. The children's lives were in danger. Everyone associated and affiliated to them was in danger. And then, because of these circumstances, they decide to go on exile, in essence. And so this is around 82. And I was trying to find out who is Dimpo in this time. And I was like, so now she's not just a woman who is in this puppy love with Chris Hani. There has been some things that have been happening in life and in and around who she was. And that is trauma. As much as you want to look at it like, yeah, no, it was just the police looking for a husband. No, everybody was in danger because of the husband. And now she was in danger twice over because of her own involvement. And it was a traumatic time for her. And I can just imagine how that took a toll on her brain and on her emotions. And I am understanding around this time, she had to pick a survival strategy. Trauma comes in your life is in shambles, it's not stable. The only thing that's holding you is the love that you have for this man. You have to choose a survival method. And there's only 3 survival methods that are available for anybody, for all of us. It's the flight method, where you run away. That's the flight, right? Yeah. It's the fight method, where you have to stay and fight. And it's the freeze method, where you literally have to freeze. And with all the information that I found out about Dimpo, I honestly think she chose the freeze method when it actually comes to her dealing with what was happening emotionally. And you don't have to take my word for it. We can actually listen to her child speak about her mother. By the way, before we actually get into this, Ulindiwe, thank God, because I needed to hear this information. Ulindiwe actually wrote a book called Being Chris Hani's Daughter. I don't know where it's available, but I am going to look for it. I am going to find it and I am going to review it. It's a great book. I've listened to majority of the interviews that she has done in and around this book. It came out a long time ago. I think it's like close to 10 years now, maybe 8, but I am going to find it. It's a great tool, but Asko Apo actually listen to what Ulindiwe says about who her mother is around this chaotic time.
Dimpho, that's my mother's name. She was, and she still is. Old age has softened her corners a bit, but she was an incredibly formidable woman. You'd have to be married to a terrorist. She managed to raise 3 girls, beautifully, very Martha Stewart-like in the home, but she had a tongue that could cut like nothing could. She has actually been known to reduce grown men, comrades, to tears. And this was the woman who raised me. She was very hard on us. But at the same time, her love came into the care she put. I didn't grow up hearing Mama say, I love you, or just Mama giving us a hug. But I grew up in a warm home. I grew up with baking, cooking, every single comfort creature, every single comfort that I could have. We had a beautiful home. But in terms of my mother saying those words, I love you, or just giving us a hug, that never happened.
Yep. I can definitely believe that she went into dictator mode. I can actually believe that she went into stoic mode. I can actually believe that. And I don't know if you can choose 2 survival options, but the main one for her was obviously to freeze, to bury the emotions deep down. But what's important to note at the same time is the fact that Dimpho actually was still showing up as a mother. She was still cooking, taking the children to school, and doing all of these things. But she was not available emotionally. And you cannot, I don't know if you can, but dealing with the life that she was dealing with, it would have been too much for her to have emotions and to also have action. And I think what she chose to be in and around that time is to be a woman that was just dealing with the life that she was given. Like, I'm just gonna survive, try to stay alive, and hopefully this dream that me and my boo had is actually gonna come true at some point. They actually go and stay in Lusaka, Zambia for a year. And the funny information that I actually did find out about this year in Lusaka is the fact that the children, now 3, the last born actually being around 1 years old. The other ones are probably like 7 and 5. I'm bad with numbers, by the way. And they were raised by this woman called Margaret.
Yeah. So even being left in Zambia with Auntie Margaret was still an adventure.
Because it's out of the, it's a little bit further away from South Africa. Do you then see your dad, Chris Hani, a little bit more?
Yes.
And I know you guys were flying overseas by then. Was that all glam for you?
It was very, very glam. It was very glam. But the thing is, what Mama also said was that Auntie Margaret actually told my dad not to come so often to see us because every time he left, we'd start back from the beginning. We'd be traumatized and crying and wanting our mom and dad. So,
and I was like, Upo Dimpho? Like, where's Dimpho if her children are being raised by another human being? And I am going to go back to what I said before. Remember, I said that Udimpo got into a relationship with Ukrisani for Ukrisani. And I have everything to believe in me that her dream was to be with Ukrisani together. And I mean, this is allegedly, according to me, it doesn't have to be true. is my mom was also one of these women. We were like a byproduct. The main thing that she wanted to do was to be with my father. And I believe that's the same thing that happened to Dimple. She wanted to be with her husband. And I feel like as a woman, when you have to deal with a lot and you have to move into your masculine energy in order for you to survive, which is what I believe Dimple did, um, and you are in a relationship with a man that cannot, where you cannot be in your feminine, is that you tell yourself that when all of this chaos stops, I'm going to be able to quickly move into my feminine, and the man's going to quickly take over, and I'm going to be in my feminine energy. So I think she got that fuel oftentimes by actually just being with Chris Hani alone and living in this Nevada, even if it's for a couple of days, months, just for her to feel like her decision was being justified. And I'm not saying she didn't like the children or whatever, but I'm just saying that the children were secondary to, allegedly, I don't, to what her core goal was in life, which was to be with the Chris Hani. And she was sitting in this dream that eventually the chaos is going to subside and she's going to be with her man and she's going to relax and the ice is going to melt and she was going to be this feminine. And I think she got her dose by being with Chris Hani alone oftentimes, even if it meant abandoning and leaving the children behind. So the Zambia situation lasted for a year and it wasn't sustainable. And they had to go back to Lesotho. And Chris Hani is again back in the streets doing what he does with MK, trying to fight the apartheid government for the benefit of all of us. Let's remember that, because we're now sitting on the other side of democracy and we have a better life thanks to people like Chris Hani and thanks to Dimpo as well, because she contributed to that by keeping this man. So literally from 1983, when they back in Lesotho, to 1990, where the ANC was unbanned, they actually have sort of like this long-term marriage. I'm going to link again a clip where Dimpo is speaking about their lives.
We were in Lesotho when he was in Zambia, Angola, commuting between those three countries. Now, my children had a very different, I wouldn't say upbringing, but they didn't grow up like other children who had both parents at home at all times. I was a single mother with these three girls. Now, there was this time when he came, when we used to go to Zambia every August. Their school closed in August, and we went back, they went back to school in September. So we had these 2 months, from July rather, with Chris as a family. And I must say the ANC was so good, because every time we visited him with the girls, he wouldn't have a lot of work to do. There were times when we went to Soviet Union for holidays, went to East Germany then for holidays, the four of us. That was the moments that we all cherish. It was the most lovely times that we had together as a family.
This was the time where the family was together. But then when it's only 3 months, everything happens in a euphoric state, because this is not a permanent. It's like when you go on holiday. When you go on holiday, you forget about your real life problems because you're on holiday. And Ulindiwe, the daughter who wrote the book, actually describes it as a holiday where everybody's happy, where everybody's chippy, it's enjoyable. So basically what was happening for 9-10 years is that they had this long distance family where Chris Hani was available on the phone oftentimes, but he was not available physically. And here is what Dimpo had to say about that time.
Now, I wanted to tell you a story where the girls, they used to have at school where parents would participate in their sports day, and fathers or mothers would be expected to run. Now, in their case, every time it was just mommy who was there, And they didn't understand why is it that dad is not here, all the fathers are here, and nobody has seen our dad, that he can outrun all these other fathers. So we got to Zambia for a holiday. The girls decided they need a meeting with their father. They invited me to sit. They were much young that time, but I think they felt strong about what they were about to raise with their father. So this is what they told their father. Dad, we are with mommy alone in Lesotho. At school, other fathers go, and it's always mommy. We would like you to resign from the ANC and be a full-time dad. Chris didn't expect that type of question. He looked shocked. And at one time, he always had answers. I thought he's going to have a problem to respond. But it was so interesting the way he responded. He said to the girls, I understand that you miss to be with me, but then you'll have to make a choice. I can leave active politics tomorrow and be with you. But what you have to know is, I won't be as happy as you see me every day. I'll be miserable because I love doing what I'm doing. My people have to get their freedom. You'll not believe it. My two girls said, okay, Dad, we prefer you happy. That was the end of the story.
What Dimple had to do around this time in order for her to survive is to create something that works for her. She was a full-time mother. She does say this. She was a full-time father. She does say this because Chris Hani was in the streets. And on top of that, she had to be the main provider. And then on top of that, she had to survive this emotionally, knowing that any day you could hear a phone call saying that your husband is dead, or literally have people come into your doorstep and kill you and your children. We get into 1990 where the government unbanned the ANC, so that it meant the political fighters that were in exile, like Chris Hani, and the political fighters that were imprisoned at Robben Island could be released. So Chris Hani, along with Ora Tambo and all these other political fighters that were in exile, actually do come back to the country. Noni wrote an article about when Chris Hani came back. He actually went to the Eastern Cape on this big rally that he had there. Remember, he's from Cofimvaba in the Eastern Cape. So he went there. And we actually found out for the first time the relationship dynamic between Limpho Hani and Chris Hani's family. Remember, she probably never ever met Chris Hani's family. They met in Lesotho. They got married in Zambia. So this is probably the first time she's meeting the family. And an article was written about her and how she was aloof in the back, and how she was exhibiting emotions of coldness towards Annie's family. And I mean, she doesn't know these people. And I was reading that article. I was like, well, I get what you guys are saying, but she didn't know Chris Annie's family, and we can blame her and Chris Hani for that. So in this time, and this is again according to Lindiwe, because I was trying to figure out, did they move quickly into a family when Chris Hani came back to the country? And according to Lindiwe, the answer is no. They only stayed together as a family in the Boksburg house around 1992. And this was the first time that they were actually together as a family. And I wanted to look into Dimple and her behavior around this time. And again, here's a thank you, Lindiwe, actually, because I feel like this is the only channel where we can get into Dimple, the human being. Yeah, so here's the clip from Lindiwe again.
We moved to South Africa, I think it was end of 90. And then I saw my mom grow into her role. You know, she was always the only one who made rules. Then I saw her almost transform into being a wife. Suddenly, if I said, Mama, there's a party, can I go to it? Budzan tatao, ask your father. Ask your father. Now that was a first. But I had to acclimatize. My mom became, her face even changed. There was so much peace in her face.
And I'm so happy this clip exists because it speaks about exactly what I was saying, Dimpho's dream of being with this man. You can see the change in behavior so quickly around her willing to melt the ice, her willing to move quickly into her feminine. And this is again by her giving the reins to Chris Hani, because Chris Hani was at home. You guys have a father, go ask him. Both dreams were now true. The chaos, as much as it was still very much chaotic in South Africa, but the bulk of the chaos of having to run from the apartheid government, having to be in exile, having to be in the MK was gone, because the MK did get disbanded at some point. So there wasn't even a threat of him having to go back to the MK. And most importantly, her man was back home. So she could relax and be free and start leaning into her femininity. I'm cooking, I'm in the kitchen, I'm the wife, the woman that I've always known I was going to be. Thank God this is coming true. And so the children were confused, obviously, because they were like, hi, Bo, dictator, go hello. I mean, but that happens, and I'm so happy that Dimpho actually got to experience that, as much as it was short lived. She was in a soft girl era for that year, and she was very happy. A tragic happens, and this is a year after they have moved into that Boksburg home and started to being a family.
On the 10th of April 1993, Chris Hani was murdered. Many believe the uproar over his death fast-tracked talks for democracy. To the family, it was simply a nightmare.
I looked at my daughters and thought, gee, what am I going to do with these young children on my own? That's the only thing that came to mind at the time.
Chris Hani gets assassinated, and a very sad time for the country, a very sad time for everybody who was behind Chris Hani, but most importantly, a very sad time for Dimpho and her children. Remember, they were now in a happy state as a family, and then all of a sudden, oops, this gets taken away. And this is again from Ulindiwe, where she speaks about the fact that she did not only lose her father, Chris Hani, due to the assassination, she also lost her mother. I don't know if she ever got her mother back.
So when a death happens in your immediate family and the chaos of the week happens, you don't have time to think about what's happening. What happens afterwards, that's where the pain comes. The silence of abandonment. Because now everybody has to return to their normal lives. And we were left in a home that felt like a ghost town. Every corner where I turned, I thought my father would be there. My mother was a zombie. She'd wake up every morning at 3 a.m. to clean, because that's how she was dealing with it. And we were just told to go back to school. And I don't remember being offered therapy. I just knew that I had to pretend that everything was okay. I had to pretend everything was fine. Our world didn't just implode.
Every time a trauma occurs, we have to choose a survival strategy. Dimpho as being Dimpho and being used to swallowing emotions and trauma, I believe she went into the same freeze mode. But let's get into the children quickly. So she had 3 children, and we don't hear any news about Noah, the firstborn. At the time of her father's assassination, she was 20, but we do hear about Ukwezi, the secondborn. She was 15, I believe. She was with her father physically. Father, Kwezi, assassination, she's watching the whole thing. And Ulindiwe, the last born, she was 12. She was actually in Lesotho with her mother.
So as we walk into the gate, that's when I just saw this rush of people, my cousin Bali rushing and just hugging me.
Oh, wow.
You know, crying, hysterical. So that's when, then I looked for Mama, and then that's when she said that he's been shot. So at that stage, I was also like, okay.
So is he at the hospital?
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so where is he? You know, and then that's when she said, no, Lindy, he's been shot dead. And then that's where we had to rush out of Lesotho and drive back.
And she speaks about the fact that on her trip to Johannesburg, it was just absolute silence and no one said a word. So for Lindiwe, the last born, her mom saying your dad is killed in Lesotho was the first and last time that they actually spoke about it. And there's no information about Kwezi and her conversation.
When her daughter Nomokwezi died in 2001, Dimpo realized they'd never spoken about Hani's death.
Kwezi was still reluctant to talk about. She says, you know, I tried to talk to Dad. You know, she still couldn't deal with it. My child died without having dealt with the loss of her father.
There was no sitting down of mom and children, and it's like, guys, your dad's passed away. We have to deal with this. Go to therapy. Let's cry together. Let's grieve as a family because we've lost our common factor. None of that happened.
We don't even, as kids, have access to our mother during this painful time. Mama is in the bedroom, she's on the mattress, she's the widow, people are seeing her, you know, up and down. I don't remember having one interaction with my mom where I was held, where I was told it's gonna be okay, because now she had that role to play. And I understand now as a person who's older that she was in the middle of it, she had her own confusion. But as a child, one tends to feel neglected.
I'll start with Kwezi. So Kwezi witnesses her father passing away in 1993. And then in 1997, the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation situation happens. She has to relive that through having to listen to Janusz, the guy who pulled the trigger, and Clive, the guy who was in cahoots, who gave Janusz the gun to kill their father, talk about how they planned this. So she's traumatized in 1993, and then she gets re-traumatized in 1997. And then the guys were found guilty. The two guys involved in Chris Hani's assassination, they were sent to prison for life. They were actually given the death sentence. And then the next information we find out about Kwezi is this article I found. It speaks about how she was a very, very difficult child. She was hard to deal with, and she was just a vile child who didn't want to hear anything from anybody. And I was like, can you blame her? You can't blame her. Like, she lost her father and she had no outlet to deal with this grief, and bottling up emotions, they always come out in ways that you can't imagine. And this is according to some tabloids and some gossip, is that she allegedly got involved in drugs, alcohol, and shady characters. We don't know this information because it was never verified. And according to this article, in 1999, she was actually allegedly sexually assaulted, raped by two guys in Hillbrow or Yeovil. And she decided to not cooperate with the police. And so the case was never followed through. And this is 2 years after the TRC. And 2 years later, in 2001, she was actually found dead in Hlubi Mboya's apartment in Fourways. And this is the article that talks about that. Yeah, so that was Kwezi's tragic short life. Moving on to the next child, Lindiwe. So Lindiwe moved to Cape Town with her mother, and she went to a boarding school. Because Lindiwe tells her own story. I don't need to tell it.
I'm no longer Lindy. I'm no longer Lindy. That person has gone. Now I'm Lindiwe Hani, Chris Hani's daughter. And that's how, from the time my father died, I was always introduced. So I stopped trying to figure out who I was. Because now I'm Chris Hani's daughter, that's who I'll ever be. And being that person brought so much immense pressure in my life. Because he was blooming Chris Hani. There's no way I could measure up to that. So I decided to pretend to not care about it and to just do things my way. My way turned out to be the most destructive, painful way. I started drinking heavily at the start of varsity. You know, before it would start out as the weekly parties, you start from Wednesday, you stop on Sunday, etc., etc. And then during that partying season, in 2001, 10th of March, a month just before my dad's commemoration of his death, we get word that my sister Kwezi had died. The way she had died was still not sure. She died away from home, and the way we found out was the most traumatic. Early Saturday morning, my mother phones me, I'm in Cape Town. She says, Lindiwe, City Press has just called me. Bara Kwezi is dead. Is this true? So I'm thinking, what? So I now phone around, and I finally get in touch with one of Kwezi's friends, and then she confirms that it's true. So I had to phone my mother to confirm that the newspaper was right. Her daughter is dead. So once again, the cycle began. I got home, the house was full, we didn't talk about it. We were skirting around the issue. I had to be strong. This was the year I turned 21. My sister was my best friend. You know, the two of us, I think, got through everything because we knew we had each other. So the pain of losing my father was incredible, but the pain of losing Kwezi was just unfathomable. That's the year that I tried my first line of cocaine, and I never turned back. For the next 13 years, I became a drug and an alcoholic, and my choice of drug was coke. In those years, I drew further and further apart from my mother, and I just decided that I can do this on my own. I was very destructive.
The firstborn, Uneo, they call her Momo, she was estranged from her mother. I don't know when this happened because she is part of the TRC negotiation. So again, we don't have any information around when she got estranged.
After your sister passed away, it was just you, her, and Momo left.
Yeah.
And Momo and her are not talking. They are estranged, you know.
By this time, she was a grown woman. She was married and she had children. And secondly, Lindiwe speaks about the fact that her mom was a trigger and she needed to get away from her mother in order for her to heal.
The biggest thing is that in this whole thing, I learned how to set boundaries with the most important person in my life, my mother. My mom and I had a conversation after I came out of rehab, and I said, Mama, you and I need a break because you are my biggest trigger. And we took that break. My mom comes from the school, the Black African women's school of strength means resilience. It means that you don't cry. You take things, you bury them deep, deep down, and you take them to your deathbed. And that kind of life was not serving me well.
Did you lose your mom at the same time that you lost your dad?
I think I did. No, not that I think I did. I know I did, because immediately after Daddy died, you know, then the elections came about, and my mother began canvassing on behalf of the ANC. And then soon after the ANC got into power, she became an MP and had to move to Cape Town. We were in Johannesburg. So in the space of a year, I lost two parents.
So back to Dimpho. So Dimpho, I don't know how to say this in a way that is comprehensible without judgment. In her ghost mode, you know, when you're in ghost mode, you don't release things, you don't grieve, you don't, like, you know, when you pasha, things come out. And her daughter actually says that she didn't want to be like her mother, where she bottles things and leaves in the surface. So I believe that that's exactly what Dimpho did, bottle things and leave in the surface. And what's been prevalent for me in doing research post Chris Hani's death is the fact that she's been labeled as an angry Black woman. She's been labeled as bitter. She's been labeled as uh, all these stereotypes that we have for Black women, like difficult, hard, her. And I do see her clips. It actually does come across as she is that woman. Like there is some form of anger and bitterness that is inside of her. The way she talks, the way she speaks to people. I saw it was like a 10-year anniversary commemoration of Chris Hani, and the way she was speaking, I was like, I'm scared of this woman.
When Chris died, I'm not emotional, I thought about it. And President, I'm terribly sorry that I bring personal things here, but this is the only platform where I can tell South Africa the truth, because the press has been lying, deliberately misleading South Africans. That's the best thing they know how to do, né? Some of the stories I was hearing for the first time, but one thing I know, he's not the father of these women.
I've pretty much watched a lot of these commemorations for Chris Hani, and Dimple's speeches have been pretty much the same, and she has been using the platform to sort of like address issues that she might be having at the time, whether it's the release of the assassins, whether it's the alleged children, whether it's issues with the law, the judge commissioners, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to plug all of them, but that's pretty much the gist. So moving on, when I looked at Dimpo's life outside of Chris Hani, I'm not finding anything on the internet. So her life ends with the ANC and the government in 1999, and she chooses to focus on other things. I saw something about her being a board member, but from where I'm sitting, it looks like she has engulfed herself in pretty much preserving the legacy of Chris Hani, and that's been pretty much her primary focus for the years. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to try to psychoanalyze Dimpo, but I do believe that she didn't move into accepting the death and grieving. And this is because I've seen how Linda has dealt with her situation. And you can see at some point she was like, you know what, we have to separate so that I can come out and be my own version, my own person. And Lindewe also speaks about the fact that her being Chris Hani's daughter actually trumped her own existence, and she hated it. And I also believe that for Dimpo, that being Chris Hani's widow actually trumped her being, and whether before she could see herself as something that was separate from Chris Hani, after Chris Hani's death, she actually decided to merge herself with Chris Hani, because since Chris Hani's death, she has been consumed with the Chris Hani agenda in every way, shape, or form, to an extent that it doesn't show who she is outside of Chris Hani. I also wanted to add that this has also been by design, because there's been a lot that's been happening in and around Chris Hani and his legacy since his passing in 1993, from the TRC hearings to creating the commemorations to keeping his legacy alive, and also the conversations around the parole of the ones that were involved in the assassination. Clive Davy Lewis was paroled in 2015 and he passed away in 2016. And then Janusz Walus has also been asking to be pardoned. And then eventually he was also pardoned in 2022. And then in 2024, December, he was actually released and sent back to his country in Poland.
Victims of crimes are often blamed and re-traumatized by our courts. I have first-hand experience. We sat in court and were blamed and shamed. This is in the Constitutional Court. I'm told Comrade Soli says it was last year. I thought it was this year. Responding to a supposed to be sorry letter from my husband's killer. The judge is pertinent that this letter that I never received should have been responded should have been responded to positively by me. Dear South Africans, dear comrades, I have never, ever received a letter from Walus, neither from the Chief Justice. So I don't know what letter they were talking about. However, the judgment or the reason that Walus was given parole was because Chief Justice Zondo felt I didn't answer the bus letter. Remember, Walus is white, so I'm black woman, no husband, so I can be bullied. And then
So basically, Dimpo didn't approve for Wallace's release, but then the Constitutional Court went above her head and released Wallace anyway.
this country is finished, where in this country, a foreign white can come into South Africa, kill my husband. I don't know if you had, Zondo never referred to my family, to myself, to my children, and the trauma and the suffering. He couldn't give a sorry for my French. He couldn't be bothered.
So as recent as this year in April, Walus actually went on an interview and said he would do it again given the opportunity. And he's pretty much not remorseful for what he did. And this is Dimpo's reaction to those news.
And said, Goli, you don't make peace. When your loved one gets murdered in that way, you don't find peace. You just get used to the idea that he's not around. Peace is not the right word, I think.
Yeah.
Because we act differently to pain. So I wouldn't say we have made peace. What I would say is we are getting used to the idea. However, where my gripe is, at the Constitutional Court, we, SACP and myself, through our lawyers, told Mr. Zondo that Walus is not remorseful. But Zondo said to me, I never answered the letter where Walus was asking for forgiveness for killing my husband. But guess what? My God loves me. He went back to Holland, and you all watched the video. What did he say? He said, if you were to give him a chance, he would kill my husband again. So, Koli, in your program, I would love you to invite Judge Zondo to come.
As I am concluding this, as much as we have spoken a lot about Dimpo's shortcomings, I actually see a very strong, resilient woman who has had to deal with a lot of trauma. And she actually did a great job managing the circumstances that were given to her. It wasn't easy. I believe Dimpo actually does know what has happened to her family on a surface level, but she hasn't dealt with what has happened to her family on an emotional level. But are we ever going to see a Dimpo that has grieved, accepted, and has moved on from Chris Hani's assassination? Not move on, but release is the word that I'm looking for. And according to her, the answer is no. This is what she had to say.
Chris was shot 30 years ago because there's still that second person. I don't have closure. That's why I'm wearing black today. I'm still mourning. Until such time the truth comes out, I'll be mourning for life.
An existence for her doesn't exist outside of Chris Hani, outside of her being a widow for Chris Hani. And this journey has taken her to a lot of places, and it has taken a toll on her. I wanted to just shine a light into the real lives of the political wives, and Dimpo obviously was the first one. And she's 77 years old now. I was doing calculations. She's known Chris Hani for around like 52 years. And the death of Chris Hani actually has a longer period of like 32 years. as opposed to the time that they were together. And for her to say she's still mourning Chris Hani 32 years later says a lot about where she wants to be. I am grateful for the Hani family. I'm grateful for Dimpho. I'm grateful for Lindy for writing the story. I'm grateful for the people who wrote the articles that we quoted here. With that said, I have no further information to give to the masses. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.